This is the first Thursday of the week, of the month, definitely the first Thursday of the week, and the first Thursday of the month. So every first Thursday, I do a question and answer. And so if you guys are watching on Zoom, you can raise your digital hand. You can type it to me if you want to in the comments as well. Hello, who's that? Christine. And if you guys are watching online, you can also type it into the comment section there. And I have to put a cough drop in because I'm starting to lose my voice. So every question and answer class, I like to give the same disclaimer that my Steve always gave, which is this is not the only answer to your question. This is not written. I mean, some of the things that I'm going to say are probably written in stone somewhere, but don't think of it that way. Don't think of it like this is the only answer, the best, highest answer. And this is because if you ask me in 10 years time from now, I'll give you a significantly better answer than I gave you today. I don't want to think like what I'm saying right now is perfect or complete. It's just where I'm at this point in my practice in my life. And what I've learned from my teachers and all that stuff. So, give me a little bit of leeway with my answers, and don't expect it to be perfect, please. So with that said, any questions? And if you're here, you can raise your fleshy hand. Yes, ma'am, thank you. Somebody's got to say something, or I'm just going to be standing here staring at the cameras. Go ahead.
How do you maintain belief in your meditation practice when you feel like life is just impossible?
We're starting with the softballs, huh, Catherine? How do you maintain belief in your meditation practice when you also believe that enlightenment is just impossible? Well, let me tell you, I'm intimately acquainted with this scenario, and I'll tell you my journey, and we'll see, the trajectory that I assume we're both on. So, Catherine's question is a very common experience, because when we think enlightenment, we have a tendency to think of, I'm becoming the Buddha, or I'm becoming this totally transcended, like perfect being. And the truth is that, there is only one Buddha. There's only one Jesus. Maybe you believe in reincarnation or something else. And of course you can say, like, there are people who are like this. There are people that hold a similar kind of, place or sway, and all of that is true. But I'm not going to turn into this specific person from history, and neither are you. Now, we will have some of the same qualities, and there are for sure people who we can point to who exist today in the world or from the past. Come on in. And we might say, I want to be kind of like this person. I want to have, these kinds of qualities. All that is great. But, boy, it's a big feat. It's a big thing to think of, like, I'm going to be totally complete. I'm going to completely arrive at the end of my journey and be totally enlightened. That's a big ask. So, when you start to think of it in those terms and you're like, I don't know that I'm ever going to arrive there. First of all, I'll say, you're probably right. Second of all, I'll say, you're also on some other level definitely totally wrong. So shame on you. Because we are, all of us, on some level, a spark of the divine. We are, just as holy as the Buddha or Jesus, as, the entire universe and all that. And so we all have that within us. Really, enlightenment on some level, the way that I like to think of it, is just recognizing what's already there, rather than what a lot of people think. And how I used to think of it is, it's like, I'm down here and I got to build stuff on top of myself to become great. It's like the opposite. It's like the real me is down here, and then this is all the junk on top of it, and I've got to clear away all this nonsense to get to, the true self, the highest self, that divine kind of, perfection within us. And so if you think of it that way, and it's basically the same thing, there's still work to be done, but it has a different kind of feeling to it because it feels like it's always there. All I have to do is kind of find it. I don't have to necessarily build up lots and lots of work to get to this point. It can be a thing that I just recognize today. And then maybe the next day I don't recognize it, right? So part of this has like a very kind of flighty nature to it, right? Enlightenment on some level is just recognizing that wonderful version of ourself that's always there. And I heard somebody say this phrase once that just blew my mind. It's such a perfect, simple, just logistically easy to understand phrase. He said, he described enlightenment as letting go of the habit of identifying as the ego. So the habit that we have is we're always identifying ourselves as a certain kind of a small way. And we see, we look at ourselves in the mirror, we're like, this is me. I have, these finite proportions and I'm this way and I have this kind of personality and these kinds of abilities and whatever. Hi, you guys. Come on in. So when we are constantly kind of identifying ourselves that way, why don't you grab something for these guys? Good to see you again, Kyle. When we're identifying as that, this is a habit. This is just a kind of thought that we've gotten used to the way that we see ourselves. And so what we're trying to do through meditation, and this is getting at the heart of Catherine's question, is kind of breaking that habit. So when our habit is, I see myself as this, to break the habit, what we have to do is to see ourselves as something else. I got to see myself as what's behind the darkness of closed eyes. I can just kind of attach to the breath and feel this. So it's more of like a letting go of something. And then meditation and this kind of journey to getting to enlightenment doesn't have to feel like it's all or nothing, right? Because then it's like I might kind of peak that version of myself. I might see a little bit of it today, maybe in this meditation, maybe after my meditation is done, and maybe I don't see it, but I know that it's there. It's kind of always underlying. Another great thing that I heard from Isifu once, and I'm sure he heard it somewhere else too, but he said, if prayer is talking to God, then meditation is like listening to God. And what if there was a place, there's some mountaintop somewhere where you can go, and you know for sure if you go there, God's going to say something to you. Well, of course you're going to go to the mountaintop. It doesn't even matter how it's going to be the craziest, most dangerous mountaintop to get to. You're climbing Everest. If you know that God's going to speak to you, God's going to speak to you, Catherine. You have to get to the mountain. Now, maybe you don't know for sure that God's going to say something to you. Maybe it's like there's a 50% chance that God's going to say something to you. You're also probably still going, right? Well, maybe there's a point where we can dilute this enough where you think like there's a super tiny chance. Maybe it's 1 in 1,000 or 1 in 1,000,000, but aren't you going to go to the mountaintop just to see? Maybe God's waiting there for you. The universe, the divine is waiting there for you. So that's what meditation is. It might be a 1 in 1,000,000 shot, like, right? That's the time that you finally hear something like this, or you finally allow your ego to drop away, and it's just everything and nothing. So try that. I always like that idea of every time I sit, it could be something that just like out of nowhere just touches me, and it's just like, oh. But then there's definitely this idea of all I'm trying to do is break this habit of ego identification, and that takes time. It takes lots of time, and because this meditation might not have gotten me all the way there, I can still think of it as like it's kind of chipping away, clearing away a little bit more of that garbage that's in the way. Other questions? I've got one from Tanya. Go ahead, nice and loud for us so we can hear it all the way across the ocean.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can.
My question is about anger. Anger, however just you might feel it is, you know you want to let go of it, you know you need to let go of it to move forward and make progress in whatever area. But it's really hard to do. Is there something, how can you let go of that or even be more proactive about it and actually do something to throw it away from you? Especially when you know that it's hanging in there because you know it's rooted in fear or insecurity or something of the sort. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's beautiful. So for those of you who didn't hear, we're talking about anger, not just any anger, a righteous anger, the anger that you know you're supposed to be feeling, and it's just and it's right. And I'm laughing because I had this experience last night, and we'll talk more about that. But I'm an expert in this, Tanya, and I think that this is a super common experience. Everybody, first of all, let's be honest. Usually when we feel angry, we think that we're absolutely right in feeling angry. And of course, it's always a righteous anger. It's always just. But then there are times where it's like, you can tell, even if you step back, a lot of times you can kind of recognize with a little bit of perspective that this is not really something that I need to be angry about. And actually, I can see the other person's perspective. But I think what Tanya's talking about is those times where when you step back and you get perspective, you realize how bad it truly is and how really angry you should be. And everybody else can see it too. And there are going to be things like that. I mean, there are injustices in the world that everyone can point to and be like, this is obviously wrong and we should get angry and do something about it. But those aren't usually the things that we get personally angry about. It's the things that somebody else has done to us. And I'm not going to try to tell you that you should just not be angry. I'll tell you that anger has limited effectiveness in my experience, and if you let it run your life, you're only going to get so far. So I like this idea of using anger and sadness and any other kind of emotion as a driving force to get you off your butt to do something. But if you hold on to it while you're doing the thing, it's probably going to be counterproductive. So maybe anger gets you to finally initiate the conversation, but if the entire conversation you're speaking from anger, you've all experienced that before, it doesn't go well. The other person just gets angry and then you're just yelling at each other and butting heads. So be able to let go, right? It's like the Dalai Lama said, somebody asked him this question. I don't know who had the gall to ask the Dalai Lama this, but somebody asked him, sir, do you ever have thoughts of sex? The Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama is like, yes, but I don't dwell on them. And that was it. And he moved on. And some people, I mean, if somebody else was asked that question, there could be some righteous anger and some righteous indignation with that. But the Dalai Lama is great. He's just like, yeah, but I don't let it bother me. I just move on. And anger can be, I would say, among the hardest things to let go of. It really grips us, especially when we can step back and look at it from a perspective where we know that everyone else would agree with us that we would be angry. Now, I'll tell you, last night, I didn't have the righteous anger, but I felt for sure like I had the right to be angry. I was picking up my wife at the airport. Her flight got in at 11 o'clock. She did not get in the car until after 12 o'clock. I was sitting at the airport the entire time. Now, of course, when you have been sitting on the plane on a runway for an hour, you are even more pissed off than the person who was sitting in the car watching TV on their phone. But we're both angry, of course. This is not a good situation. Now, here's the thing. In my mind, my wife gets off the plane and she's so excited to see me, and she rushes over to the car and we fling open the door and we give a loving embrace, and everybody's so happy. It's a tender moment. What happens in reality is I call her, I'm like, which door are you at? She's like, I'm at 5D. And I'm like, okay, I'm at 5C, but I can't move my car anymore. I'm right here. Can you just walk over? And she's like, you want me to walk over to you? And I'm like, yes. So she walks over, and as she gets close to the car, I open the door and I open up the back thing to put her baggage in, and she just like walks right by me and throws her bag in the back, and then in a huff gets in the seat. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're not going to hug me? And she's like, I'm pissed off right now. And she had a reason to be pissed off, because when she tried to call me to tell me that she was there, my phone did not get it, because after midnight, my phone goes into do not disturb, because I do not like getting called after midnight when I'm in bed. Nobody call me. And so her call doesn't go through. So she has to call me like 6 times before I finally get it. Now, that was only like 3 minutes of her time, but it was enough to really annoy her on top of what she had already gone through. Now, but then there's me. I drove over there and sat at the airport for an hour, and she's just gonna just walk by me in a huff and throw her bag in the back? Of course I have the right to be angry. But then there's her. She sat on the plane for an hour sitting in the tarmac, and she had to wait the whole time. And then she had to call me, and she thought that I wasn't going to pick her up, because she thought, well, he's not answering the phone. What's this going to have? So you can see we're both pissed off, and that's when it certainly does not work. But I felt after that, I was like, I'm not going to say anything to her. I'm going to wait until she apologizes. And you can probably guess how that went. We were in silence the whole way home. And then we finally get there, and I'm like, look, because I realize, by the way, from the very beginning of all this, I know exactly what's happening here. I'm like, you're being stupid. This is exactly the way that you would be responding in her shoes. You know that this is what, but I'm still like, but I'm angry and I want to stay angry, so I'm not going to say anything. So finally I realized that, well, no good is going to come from this, until I finally just kind of like, let me just try to ease the tension a little bit. And so it's everything that I can muster to give, I'll paraphrase something along the lines of this. I understand why you're angry. I would be angry too. And just so you know, I'm not okay with the way that things went down when I picked you up from the airport. So if you would like me to apologize for not hearing your phone call, I'll do that again. But I also would really like for you to apologize to me. And she apologized, and that was the end of it. It was really nice. But there was that real long time where I was really satisfied with just being totally silent and being angry and just seething in it. And that's, I think, what we all experience from time to time. Now, you multiply that by all the other factors of like, this is something really messed up this person did to me, and absolutely I have the right to be angry. It's even harder to let go of that. So it might not take a 20-minute car ride. It might take a 20-year journey to finally be able to truly forgive this person, but we want to kind of start heading in that direction. And, you know, forgiveness, the popular belief or kind of view that people have of forgiveness is that it's for the other person. It's not. It's for us. We forgive so that we can let go, so that we don't have to carry it around. And I know Tanya's not even talking about forgiveness. She's talking about just, can I just let go of this anger? And you get the logistical reason behind this, why anger just doesn't work, because it really just causes things to be stuck. And, you know, the reasoning behind why I want to let go of anger, because it doesn't really help me. But that's very different from actually letting go of anger, especially when it's righteous anger. So how do we do that? Well, I think part of it is kind of related to what I was talking about before. This anger it feels like the anger is sucking us down into this spiral, and it's got this life to it. And this anger is this inescapable force. And it's like we're being flushed down this toilet of anger. But the anger exists within us, right? We are, for lack of a better thing that I can think of right now, we are the toilet. The anger is within us. So we have the ability to let go of it. With meditation, we will start to recognize when this initial thought comes. And I know that as angry as Tanya might be, Tanya is also not a very angry person. I'm sure that all of us have experienced some level of anger that's similar to or even worse than that. But what happens is, it's not like we're literally just thinking about this thing and nothing else for the entire day. Other things kind of interject. And, I got to eat my breakfast, and I'm thinking about what am I going to eat for breakfast, or I'm thinking about how my breakfast tastes. And then the first thought that comes back, oh, there's this thing that I got to be really angry about. So when that thought crops back up, we recognize it, and we try to let it go immediately. And this is not easy, but this is one of the things that we can be working on. So you think of anger as this giant boulder on the top of a hill, and the hill is steep, and you're kind of stuck on the hill. You can't jump off and get out of the way of the boulder. You have to stop the boulder. The best place to be is not at the bottom of the hill, because it's got all this momentum and it's going to squish you for sure. You don't want to be anywhere from the bottom to the in-between, because the boulder is still squishing you. You want to be at the very top with your hand up on the boulder like this, so that when the boulder first starts to move, I'm just like, no, you stop it. So that is an ability that we can start to get through our practice, where we recognize the thoughts immediately. And when you recognize the thought, you might be able to let it go immediately. The problem is when it gets that momentum and it starts to go, and that's when it feels like righteous anger that you have to hold on to. That's when it's already got momentum. But if you are able to recognize it immediately and move on to something else, that's one good way of dealing with it. I'll say that, again, back to what I was talking about in the beginning, is our emotions are there to spur us into some kind of action. And there might very well be some action to take. Again, try to set aside the anger when you're actually having the conversation or taking the action, whatever it is. But if you have taken this action, sometimes it will completely clear up the anger. It's gone, because that thing is resolved. Also, sometimes it's not completely resolved, but you've done something about it, and so you can at least tell yourself, even though this person is still doing their ridiculous thing over there, I've done what I need to do. I've taken care of my side of it. I have taken responsibility for what I can take responsibility for. And that, even if nothing else, will probably allow us to more easily and smoothly let go of the anger. When we first recognize it, then your first thought can be like, I already dealt with this. I don't need to deal with it anymore. I don't need to hold on to this. I don't need this to take over my whole life right now. I can just let it go because I've dealt with it. And it'll become clear if you have not really dealt with it, because it will continue to come up and it will be something that's kind of inescapable. So take the actions that you need to take. And if there are no more actions that you need to take, then you'll be able to recognize that and say, I don't know what you want from me. There's nothing else to do. I'm just going to let go of this. There's nothing else to be done. Any other question? We're doing question and answer tonight, you guys. If you have a question about meditation or anger or anything, you can ask it. I assume you're not leaving your hand up for another question, are you, Tanya? No? Nobody other questions? Addiction. That's a statement. You want me to just talk about my feeling?
How to say no to desire.
Ooh. So yeah, we are all addicts for sure, and some things that are easier to get addicted to than others, but the addiction to desire is the human experience This is what we all have. So on one hand, I really like to remind myself of that and just say, like, this is not me being a bad person, because then when it starts to meet with resistance and we feel like I've got to fight against this desire, then sometimes it gets even more of a hold on us, right? So we can recognize and accept, like, this is who I am. I'm a human being. I'm not the Buddha yet, or I'm not fully recognizing my Buddha nature, so I still got a little bit of desire. At least in this moment, I do. And that's okay. I am who I am, and this is the way that I'm supposed to be now. And then from then, I can take choices or take action and make choices to move on from there. I think acceptance is a super important part of it. And acceptance is very different from just allowing it to take over and just be, just like accepting the anger. We don't want to let it take control over us. We want to be able to recognize it and then deal with it. So there's the logical place that always works for me, and most people are not as like robotic as I am with desire and emotion, all that, and I understand that, but I'll still tell you what works for me anyways. The desire is a cycle. It's a circle, and it's inescapable, because we have a desire. Let's say we've got $1 and I've got a desire for $2. And then if I work really hard and I get those $2, now I'm going to have a desire for $10. And as soon as I get my $10, then I'm going to want a Maserati. And then I get the Maserati and it's like, nope, I want the Lamborghini. And then I want the mansion, and then I want this. And there's no escaping it. It is an endless cycle. This is I'm getting it, I got it, I want something else. And you get all the way back down to the bottom. So the fact that you're asking the question probably means that you already grasp the logical side of this, which is simply like, it's a pointless exercise. You're like, who is it? Who's pushing the rock up the hill? Sisyphus? No, Atlas holds the rock. I will say it's somebody, a famous Greek person in mythology pushes the rock up the hill and then it slides back down the hill. Different from the anger rock that we're holding on to. And it's like, this is torture. This is torture. All of human existence on some level is torture. We're being tortured by our own desires and our own inability to let go of them, because we feel like we have to do it. And look, media and society does not help us with this. It's constantly bombarding us with all these messages of like, what you need to do to get happy is to get this thing, or to look this way, or to whatever, and it's all nonsense. So the logic of that is very suspect, and what makes the most sense is to just let go of desire, of course, because there's no end to it. We will always try to get the next thing. So how do we let go of it? Well, again, none of this is a silver bullet. This is not magic, but meditation is super helpful for this, because it can help us to recognize the thought. It can help us to recognize the desire. You can immediately label it and just say desire. Just like in meditation, when we have a thought, we can just label it as thought. It doesn't have to be good or bad. It's not judgment. And so when you recognize that in your own life and you just label it as desire, that allows you to let go of it. Building that up as a practice, and it becomes something that is more automatic, is really nice. And this is where like we can take this systematic approach to our very kind of biological being, right? We are not machines, but we are on some level kind of programmable. And when we practice something enough, it becomes the thing that we are, becomes who we are. So when we practice, it seems like a very robotic way of being to just be like, I'm going to practice letting go of this. I'm going to practice letting go of desire. It's not very romantic. It seems like some, big realization should happen, and we should have some amazing experience or some terrible experience, some kind of trauma that really makes us feel like, okay, now I can finally let go of this. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can just make the choice in a state of mind, in a really great place, we can make the choice that I'm going to do this work to let go of this thing. Maybe it's a specific desire. I'm trying to quit smoking. I'm going to make the choice when I'm in a great place to practice letting go. And then, you're going to fail, and then you're going to keep going back to work and practice letting go again. And this is back to the same idea of letting go of the habit of ego identification. It's all habit on some level. And so this is what we want to be able to do, is to be a master of our actions rather than a prisoner of our reactions. We practice the actions that we want to take. We practice them over and over again. And when we slip, we just jump right back on it and practice again. And sometimes we'll need help. We'll need help from people around us. We might need to seek professional help. We might need medication, whatever it is that works for you. But it's almost a guarantee that you're going to slip. And then the real strength comes from the ability to get right back up when you slip. In martial arts, they say fall down 7 times, get up 8. And it doesn't make any sense, because it should be fall down 7 times, get up 7 times, but it doesn't have the same ring to it as fall down 7 times, get up 8. The point is you just keep getting up, and you get up as many times as it takes. It might be fall down 999,999, get up 1,000,000 times, and then maybe finally we'll get it. And maybe that'll be the one time that God is there to say something to us. Sit comfortably. So I'll go over some review of ways to sit in meditation. I always sit on my knees because my hips don't like sitting cross-legged, but cross-legged can certainly work too. You can sit on the ground if you're nice and flexible. And posture is something that we've been talking a lot about this week in the dojo. So good posture means, in meditation, your knees cannot be sticking up too high above your hips, because then your legs will fall asleep. Your hips, you don't want to have an overarch in either direction. I'm definitely not slouching this way, but I don't also want to arch too far back. So you're basically just kind of stacking your spine, one vertebra on top of the next. And your shoulders roll back and relax with your hands upturned. They can be together or they can be separate, but we don't want to be slouching down like this with our hands sliding down. So try to keep your hands up here. And then your chin is parallel to the ground. If we're looking up or looking down, that's going to be kind of weird for a few different reasons, not the least of which is just you might literally fall over during meditation. So try to keep your spine in a perfectly stacked position. And it doesn't mean that you're overly tense, you're not rigid, you're not using lots of muscle to keep yourself here. You're just in a solid position. You should feel like a pyramid or a mountain. You're very rooted, very solid. There's no moving here. Close eyes. You want your eyes to be slightly upturned to the point between your eyebrows. This will help you not to fall asleep during your meditation. And we associate this raised position of the eyes with a higher consciousness. And from here, you're going to relax and watch the breath. Let go of all thoughts, worries, and cares. Be here now. When your mind wanders, bring it gently back to the breath. You can have that thought, and you can just label it as thought without judgment. That can allow you to let it go just as soon as you recognize it. Every time you come back to the breath, allow that to feel like you're coming home. So often in meditation, we feel like we're fighting the thoughts and we're resisting, but when you recognize the thought, you just let it go and come back to the breath and allow that to feel really good. It should feel like you're coming home from a long trip. It's comforting, it's inviting you in. That reinforces that return to the breath.